Coaches and parents, we're getting right into this one because I'm a little fired up. Favoritism is not the problem. It's just not the problem. No. Favoritism, a coach showing favoritism is not the problem. In other words, most coaches do not just like one player more than the other, even though that player is not as good as the other player, and then they play that player. It's not really the problem. Even if coach is showing favoritism by not playing certain players and playing others that might not be as good, it's because of these two things right here. So we're going to break this whole graph down for you. You might be a little confused. Coaches, there are two challenges that you're facing that is it's the reason why parents and athletes are saying, my coach just shows favoritism. Like, coach, I know that you probably don't, but unless you address these two issues, people are always going to think that you show favoritism, and if you show favoritism, or the people think you do, it will lead to gossip, it'll lead to poor team unity, and it'll lead to a slew of other things for your culture that you don't want. And then athlete, favoritism's not the problem. You've got to work through 4 micro problems that are leading to you complaining about favoritism. So guys, let's stop focusing on this right here. Stop focusing on this, because this is not helpful to anybody to focus on that. It's blame shifting, it gets your mind off the prize, and it gets your mind not focused on the root that leads to the fruit of getting playing time.
Get your mind not right. And the big thing is, this is becoming a major scapegoat that athletes and parents are turning to when we always say control the controllables. Well, if you control what you can control, this thing, this favoritism scapegoat that we're running to, isn't going to be the issue anymore.
Let's dive into this. So, coach, you are not playing John. You're just not giving him playing time. John thinks he's good enough. He thinks that he deserves to be on the field. And you're not playing him. You're playing Steve, John's friend. And then Steve and John are having a little conversation about it on the sideline when the game's not going on. But the reason why John is upset with you isn't because he's not getting playing time. It's because you haven't done this right here, communication. You haven't sat down with him one-on-one, explain your expectations, explain why he's not getting playing time, and then here's the thing, given him a solid roadmap of what he will need to do in detail to be able to play. I always say that if you can't commit to having one-on-one meetings with your players at least twice a season, you'll never be a great coach. I firmly believe that one-to-one connection in this day and age, more than ever, is so needed because athletes have some of these things going on that we're going to touch on. Coach, you're going to want to hear these. But your communication is the reason why this whole favoritism talk is going on right now.
Yeah, and don't get us wrong. We understand being a coach nowadays, it's hard because a lot of the coaches that we have aren't full-time coaches, right? They have a family, they have a job, and then they're coaching on top of it. It's a huge commitment, right? But if you take the time to really dial this one in, your players are going to play better for you and your culture is going to be much better. But the biggest thing is taking that time, and it's going to take time to get that one-on-one relationship.
Yeah, and it will take time, but I'll also say that it won't take a ton of time because it's not how often you talk or how long your conversations are. It's the quality and the depth and the realness, looking the kid in the eye and letting them know, this is where you stand today, this is what you need to do to get better, here's how we're going to do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a super long conversation, coach, so communication, if you're serious about players not using this as a scapegoat, like Travis said, and parents especially not doing that, then communication is going to have to level up some.
Yeah, and then going on that, have exit interviews. At the end of the season, let that player know what their big areas of opportunity is going into the offseason and give them a little direction, give them a little nudge on what they should work on. I know top-tier college programs, the kids that we work with coming back from college, the ones that are a little more confident, they had that exit interview to know what they needed to do to get on the field the next year.
Yeah, and you got to be honest, too. Don't sugarcoat it. Yeah. Like a lot of times, those exit interviews are fluffy, and it's you're fearful that the kid's going to be embarrassed or whatever, so you don't say what you need to say. The other thing is short-sightedness. This one, Travis and I are going to spend a minute talking on this because Travis actually played a little devil's advocate with me before this live and challenged me on something that I agree with him on. So we're going to have to talk through it, but. Coaches, ultimately, the problem is not favoritism. We decided that. It's that coach isn't playing a player that thinks he should be able to get playing time. That's what it is. And so by coach never playing that kid, ever, like not playing him when the team is up by 10 goals, not playing him when there's 2 games left in the season and you've already locked up playoff spots, there's certain situations, and I'm going to have Travis challenge me on this too, certain situations where you could play a player, but you might be holding something against him, and that's where the favoritism thing does kind of come in, and you don't play him for whatever reason, whether it's something that you have against him or whether it's, maybe it's just because he doesn't perform well, but you don't play him. And I think that's very short-sighted, because what happens when the starter gets injured in playoffs? And then you put in this person that's never seen the field in a game situation, and you expect them to perform, but they've never been in that state of mind before. Competition state of mind is way different than practice state of mind, way different. So I think it's a little bit of short-sightedness on coach's part, not planning for the future.
Yeah, and the big thing that I challenged Andrew on this one was short-sightedness. What if your team is going to make a run in the playoffs, right? In that situation, if you're a varsity and you have a bunch of seniors, you're making a run for that state championship. In that situation, games are close. How do you start sprinkling in playtime for everybody in that situation?
Right, and that's a great point. You got to decide what is most important to you as a coach. I believe for me that this is probably a more important piece to the puzzle right here, because even if you never play that kid the entire season, but you communicate it to him exactly why you're doing it, like Swen Nader's situation, Coach John Wooden not playing him, and eventually he made it to the pros, right?
Well, John, he was a bench player, but he was a highly coveted recruit that bought into John Wooden's philosophy,
right,
and didn't go somewhere else to start.
So if you even communicate to that player and you care about his success in the future, that means more to that kid than getting on the playing field. Mm-hmm. I've seen kids that haven't got any playing time, but were uplifted and felt like successful leaders, even though they didn't play, because the coach brought them up. So coaches, we have so much power here. These are just a couple of tips to get away from this favoritism for a coach. But 2 most powerful words that a kid will ever say, coach says. So coach, make sure you're saying the right things. Athlete, we got some problems that we got to work through, because this is not the issue. We got to stop blaming coach. You want to hit this one?
Yeah, so the athletes, being coachable, right? And the big thing is, if an athlete isn't coachable, that's going to be a tough one, right? If you're not taking feedback from your coach and making the changes that you need to make, and you're constantly making the same mistake, and your effort's low in practice, it's going to be really hard for that coach to want to put you in. So if you're complaining about favoritism, do a deep dive in what does your effort look like in practice, right? When you get on the field, are you taking the feedback and you're making the changes you need to make? Because if that's not happening and you're being a liability on the field, I played with some kids that just didn't get it, right? They weren't coachable. They got in their own way. They were stubborn, right? That's a situation, it's going to be hard for the coach to give you that nod.
You can't rely on coach to come to you either, unfortunately, because you can't control the coach. So we talk about coachability as extreme coachability, coachability versus extreme coachability. Coachability is, I'm slow, I'm not fast enough to play. Coach Travis, I'm waiting for him, right? And he eventually says, Andrew, you got to start doing this, this, and this to work. And I say, okay, coach, got it. And I go do it. That's coachability. Extreme coachability is, I recognize that I'm not fast, so I go to coach and say, coach, I know I'm not fast enough to play right now. What do I need to do to get better? That's where we are saying you need to level up as the athlete and take it upon yourself to really be coachable.
Now, when you do that second one, don't let your ego creep in. Because if I go to Coach Andrew and I ask, what do I need to do to get better? And he gives me hard, constructive feedback, I can't put my wall up and get defensive and say he's wrong, right? I take his feedback, he's my coach, I respect it, and I'm going to begin to make the changes that I need to make.
Mm-hmm. Next one, flat out, some of you guys listening to this are very insecure, and that is a bigger problem than coach not playing you. You're insecure, and that's the problem, because you're basing your self-worth off of you getting onto the field. You are taking coach not playing you as a hit to your character and to your core, rather than just taking it as it is what it is. Coach thinks that another player is going to be better than me. And so I think, because I'm sure more parents are watching this than athletes right now, your kid should be in school, I think that your kid is probably suffering with some insecurity if they keep blaming coach placing favorites and picking favorites as the reason for them not playing, and they're letting that crush their spirit and crush their confidence. Guys, we have to address this, and we have a population of young men and women who are very, very, very insecure. It shows through their actions and how they try to get attention. That needs to be addressed before this is ever addressed.
Yeah, and I think in some capacity we have a little bit of an entitlement issue. Just because you're on the team doesn't mean you're going to get the reps that you think you deserve without taking care of all those things you can control, right? So we got to control the controllables and try to steer away from those insecurities. And again, it's a deep dive on yourself. You got to analyze what do I need to work on to get onto the field.
Unrealistic expectations. Some student athletes aren't very self-aware, and we could change this to self-awareness. And they think that they're good enough to play, but they're not. And they're not better than the other player. And I'm going to just expedite this right to this one and let Travis talk on it. It's probably because parents, this P stands for parents. As parents, a lot of you guys are feeding into this. And I hear you talking. I hear you sharing things in front of your athlete saying, coach just likes him more. Oh, come on. We can't do that anymore, guys. We can't do it. Even if you believe it in your soul and you know it's true, not good to do. You can't do that because that takes the ball out of their court. Your son or daughter is no longer in charge of their destiny. They're no longer in charge and focused on getting better. They're just focused on what they can't control. This is a problem in society today, and I know that you guys are willing to change. I've seen it, I've talked to you, and once it's addressed, once you hear it, you're on it. And so parents, I encourage you, no longer should you ever say, coach shows favorites. Please do not say that, especially in front of your athlete. It's leading to the ultimate problem, and the problem is not favoritism.
Yeah, and I mean, they all really go hand in hand. This unrealistic expectations one, man, that's destroyed by social media and that comparison trap that we all get into, right? We see everybody, we see them scoring points, and we see their highlight reels on social media, that all of a sudden the whole concept of the role player or someone in practice pushing people to get better, that's not glamorous anymore. But every team needs that. You study any culture that breeds winning and success, I guarantee people accept those roles and they do what they need to do to make the team better. But again, it starts with the coach's communication, right? All these things really feed in hand, and once you start to address each one on the coach side and the athlete side, that's where the magic happens. Culture is king. You got to analyze these different areas and see where you're hitting.
Guys, to close, I want to actually say something that's kind of counterintuitive to what I've been saying. How do you spell unnatural? 2 N's?
Most good.
2 N's? We're just going to go with 2 N's. To not show favoritism, here's the thing. To not show favoritism is actually very unnatural, and it goes against our nature. Because we naturally gravitate towards certain people that we're connected with better, that we like more, and this goes for your players too. So if this is an issue of any kind for you, coach, just recognize it and commit to changing it. I mean, I've messed up as a leader more times than I can count. I've probably done this. I've messed up on this one. I've messed up on this one. Right? But I know you're watching this right now because you have a commitment to become better. Growth is something that's in your vocabulary. You're a leader and you want to get better. Parents, you're leaders too. Coaches, you're leaders. So pick one of these, just like we do every single day, and work on it. Guys, it's about getting better. It's not about being perfect. And this, it's an issue, but it's not the main issue. It's these things down here.
Yeah, and I mean, if you really want to do a deep dive into it, just like athletes need that feedback on where they can improve, survey your team. Ask for honest feedback. Say you're trying to get better for them and see what your athletes say. Again, self-awareness isn't something we all have innately, right? We're actually a lot lower than we think we are. So surveys are a really good way to kind of analyze, do I need to change something? Are my athletes feeling this? Do they feel like they're getting enough of this, right? And once you see it, then you can really hone in on what do I need to change for my culture.
Cool. Guys, thanks so much for watching this. Stay tuned. Next week, we're going to be diving deeper into another one of the truths about the state of youth sports. So make sure you don't miss that. Have a great rest of your week. Peace.